The gleaming spires of the Galactic Academy of History rose like crystalline fingers against the purple sky of Centauri Prime. Inside one of its countless research halls, 3 alien students huddled around a dusty terminal, their expressions a mix of curiosity and confusion. Tom, a blue-skinned Aquarian with rippling gill fins, scrolled through the ancient archives with webbed fingers. Beside him, Mark, a crystalline Lemnian whose translucent body pulsed with soft light, leaned forward to get a better look. The third student, Jack, a furry Canidian with pointed ears and keen eyes, kept watch at the door. "I don't understand," Tom whispered, his fins twitching with excitement. According to these records, humans were involved in only one interstellar conflict before the Universal Council banned them from participating in any galactic wars. Mark's crystalline form sparkled with interest. "But that doesn't make sense. Most species need at least 3 major conflicts before the Council considers war restrictions. What could humans have done in a single war to earn such a severe punishment?" The terminal hummed softly as Tom dug deeper into the classified files. The 3 students had used their combined academic credentials to access the restricted section of the archives, knowing they were breaking at least a dozen Academy regulations. "Look at this," Tom said, pointing to a heavily redacted document. "The war lasted only 2 Earth months, but the damage reports." His voice trailed off as the numbers scrolled past. Jack's ears perked up from his position at the door. How bad could it be? They were a newly spacefaring civilization back then. Their ships were practically held together with primitive welding and chemical rockets. Mark's crystalline body dimmed slightly as he processed the information. These casualty figures can't be right. How could such a technologically inferior species inflict this level of damage? Tom was about to respond when a new file caught his attention. It was marked with the highest level of security clearance, but a glitch in the system had left it partially accessible. The file name read, Operation Human Containment, Primary Justification. "I think I found something," Tom said, his fins now fully extended in excitement. "It's a personal log from Admiral Vex of the Arcturian Fleet, dated just after the war ended." The 3 students fell silent as Tom began to read the Admiral's words aloud. "We thought we understood war. We thought we knew violence. We were wrong. Humans don't fight like any species we've encountered. They don't follow conventional military doctrine. They don't seek strategic victories. When humans fight, they simply survive. And in surviving, they destroy everything in their path. We lost 30,000 ships in the Battle of Proxima Centauri. Not to their weapons, their technology was laughably primitive. We lost them because humans would rather detonate their own ships in kamikaze runs than surrender. They turned their civilian vessels into weapons. They used their own dead as bait for ambushes. But what truly terrifies me is not what they did, it's what they were willing to do. We found plans in their military archives, contingencies they called scorched earth protocols. If they had lost the war, they planned to destroy every star system they could reach, making them uninhabitable for millennia. They would rather burn the galaxy than lose it. The Council's decision is correct. Humans must never be allowed to participate in another galactic war. Not because they are too dangerous, many species are dangerous. Humans must be banned because they simply don't know how to lose. They don't comprehend defeat. They will destroy everything, including themselves, to avoid it. The 3 students sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. Finally, Jack spoke from the doorway, his voice barely a whisper, "So that's why the Council maintains a buffer zone around Earth's territory. It's not to protect other species from humans. It's to protect humans from situations where they might become that desperate again," Tom finished, his fins now lying flat against his head. Mark's crystalline body had dimmed to its dullest setting. "We should go. Professor Green's Xenohistory class starts in 10 minutes, and we still need to process what we've learned." As they logged out of the terminal and carefully erased their access traces, none of them spoke. They had come looking for an interesting research topic for their joint thesis. Instead, they had discovered one of the galaxy's most carefully guarded truths: sometimes the most dangerous species aren't the ones with the most advanced weapons or the largest fleets. Sometimes, the most dangerous species are the ones with nothing left to lose, and everything to protect. And humans? Humans had mastered that particular art long before they ever reached the stars. Professor Green's Xenohistory classroom was nearly full when Tom, Mark, and Jack slipped into their usual seats in the back row. The professor, a tall, mantis-like being with iridescent wings, stood at the front, preparing his presentation materials. Tom's fins were still trembling from their discovery in the archives. He leaned over to whisper to his friends, "Should we mention what we found to Professor Green?" Before either could answer, the professor's voice filled the room. Today's lecture focuses on an intriguing period in galactic history, the era of limited warfare protocols. His compound eyes swept across the classroom. Can anyone tell me when these protocols were first implemented? The room remained silent until Mark's crystalline form brightened slightly as he raised his hand. After the Human Containment War, Professor. Professor Green's antennae twitched with interest. Correct. Though I'm curious, most students reference it as the terminal conflict. Where did you learn that particular name? Jack shot a warning glance at Mark, whose light dimmed nervously. Tom quickly intervened. We came across it in some supplementary reading, Professor. Indeed. The professor's compound eyes fixed on the three students for a moment longer than comfortable. Well, since you seem to have done your research, perhaps you can tell the class why these protocols were necessary? The three friends exchanged glances, knowing they were walking a dangerous line between their illicit knowledge and what they were supposed to know. Jack carefully answered, to prevent total warfare and establish rules of engagement for interstellar conflicts. Professor Green clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Partially correct. But let's dig deeper. He activated the classroom's holographic display, showing a map of the galaxy with various territorial boundaries highlighted. Before the protocols, galactic warfare followed predictable patterns. Species fought over resources, territory, or ideology. But they fought to win, not to destroy. The professor's wings rustled as he moved closer to the students. The protocols weren't just about preventing total warfare, they were about preventing desperate warfare. Can anyone tell me why desperation is more dangerous than aggression? The classroom remained silent, but Tom couldn't help himself. The morning's discoveries were too fresh in his mind. Because desperate species don't fight to win, Professor. They fight to survive. Professor Green's antennae stood straight up. Excellent observation. And what makes survival-based warfare so dangerous? Tom felt Mark and Jack's warning looks, but the words tumbled out anyway. When a species fights for survival, they don't follow rules or respect boundaries. They'll use everything they have, everything they are, as a weapon. The professor's compound eyes narrowed slightly. You speak with unusual certainty about this topic. He turned back to the holographic display, switching it to show various weapon systems throughout history. The most dangerous weapon in the galaxy isn't a superweapon or a death ray. It's not even a planet killer. He paused, his voice growing softer. It's conviction. The absolute, unshakable conviction that survival is the only acceptable outcome. The classroom was dead silent now, every student captivated. Professor Green continued, the limited warfare protocols ensure that no species ever feels so threatened that they resort to survival tactics. They mandate diplomatic solutions before military action. They require proportional responses. Most importantly, they guarantee the sovereignty of all spacefaring races. He shut off the holographic display. Your assignment for next week is to research one historical conflict that influenced these protocols. And please, his gaze swept meaningfully over Tom, Mark, and Jack, stick to the approved academic databases for your research. As the students began filing out after the lecture, Professor Green's voice cut through the noise. You three, a moment of your time, please. Tom's fins went flat against his body as they approached the professor's desk. But instead of the reprimand they expected, Professor Green's voice was barely above a whisper. There are some questions in this galaxy that deserve answers, and some answers that deserve questions. But remember, knowledge, like power, comes with responsibility. He paused, his compound eyes shifting colors slightly. And some truths are classified for a reason. The three friends hurried out of the classroom, each lost in thought about the morning's discoveries and the professor's cryptic warning. They had started the day looking for a thesis topic. Now they were carrying the weight of one of the galaxy's darkest secrets, and the growing suspicion that they had only scratched the surface of the truth about humanity's brief but devastating entry into galactic warfare. The three friends sat in their usual corner of the Academy's dining hall, their food barely touched. The events of the morning and Professor Green's cryptic warning weighed heavily on their minds. We should stop, Mark said, his crystalline body pulsing with nervous energy. We've already accessed restricted files. If the Academy board finds out. But don't you want to know the whole truth? Tom interrupted, his fins rippling with excitement. We've only seen fragments. Think about it, what could humans have done that was so terrible it changed how the entire galaxy approaches warfare? Jack's furry ears twitched as he scanned the crowded dining hall. I found something else during my free period, he whispered, pulling out a small data crystal. It's an old combat recorder from a Centaurian battleship. One of the few that survived an encounter with a human fleet. Tom and Mark leaned forward as Jack inserted the crystal into his personal terminal. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a grainy recording of a space battle. The Centaurian ship's advanced sensors captured everything in stark detail. Watch the human ships, Jack said, pointing to several small dots on the display. This was near the end of the war. The recording showed a squadron of human vessels, clearly damaged and outgunned, facing a superior Centaurian battle group. Instead of retreating or surrendering, the human ships split into smaller groups. Some charged straight at the largest enemy vessels while others seemed to be making random jumps through space. Standard suicide tactics, Mark commented, but Tom's fins suddenly stood straight up. No, look closer, Tom said, his voice tight with realization. The random jumps aren't random at all. They're creating a pattern. The recording continued as the human ships that seemed to be jumping erratically suddenly emerged in perfect positions around the Centaurian fleet. Meanwhile, the ships that had charged straight in had scattered debris across a wide area. They used their own destroyed ships as cover, Jack explained, his voice grim. The debris field blocked the Centaurian sensors just long enough for the other ships to get into position. And then the recording showed the human ships activating some kind of device. The space between them seemed to twist, and in a flash of light, the entire Centaurian battle group vanished. What happened to them? Mark asked, his crystalline form dimming with horror. According to the survival logs, Jack said, the humans had developed a way to create localized spacetime distortions. They couldn't generate them with a single ship, so they used multiple ships working together. The Centaurian fleet wasn't destroyed, it was displaced in time. Some ships reappeared years later, some haven't been seen yet. Tom's fins trembled. They weaponized spacetime itself? But that's impossible. Their technology wasn't advanced enough. That's just it, Jack said, deactivating the recording. They didn't have the technology to do it safely or reliably. Every time they used this weapon, there was a 70% chance it would destroy the human ships too. They didn't care. They used it anyway. A shadow fell across their table, and all three friends looked up to find Professor Green standing there, his compound eyes shifting through various colors. "Interesting lunchtime entertainment," the professor said quietly, reaching down to pluck the data crystal from Jack's terminal. "Though I believe this particular historical record was supposed to have been destroyed after the war." The three students sat frozen as Professor Green studied the crystal. Finally, the professor spoke again, his voice barely audible. "The history department is hosting a special lecture series next week on pre-protocol warfare tactics. Attendance is strictly limited, of course, but I could arrange for 3 graduate students to attend, assuming they're interested in pursuing this line of research through official channels." He placed a different data crystal on their table. "This contains the lecture details, along with some supplementary materials that might interest you. Just remember, some knowledge comes with a price. Make sure you're willing to pay it." As Professor Green walked away, the 3 friends stared at the new crystal, each wondering if they were already in too deep to turn back. They had started looking for a thesis topic, but they were uncovering something far more significant, the truth about how a supposedly primitive species had fought the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy to a standstill, and in doing so, forced the creation of laws that would forever change how wars were fought among the stars. The lecture hall deep beneath the Academy's main campus was smaller than the 3 friends expected. Only 20 students occupied the seats, representing various species from across the galaxy. Tom, Mark, and Jack took their places near the back, trying to appear inconspicuous. An elderly Arcanian with metallic scales and 4 arms stood at the podium. His name displayed on the holographic screen, Professor Reed, Special Archives Division. "Welcome to Advanced Military History," the professor began, his scales shifting color as he spoke. "What you learn here isn't taught in regular classes. You've all signed the necessary confidentiality agreements, so I'll be direct. Today, we discuss the human anomaly." The room darkened, and a hologram appeared showing Earth's solar system. "Before we encountered humans, we thought we understood war," Professor Reed continued. "We had protocols, strategies, and acceptable losses. Humans introduced us to something we'd never seen before, adaptive warfare." The hologram shifted to show various human ships, each cobbled together from different technologies. Their vessels weren't uniform. Each captain modified their ship based on personal experience. When we destroyed one of their tactics, they didn't just create a new one, they created 50, all different, all unpredictable. Tom's fins twitched as he recognized some of the ship configurations from the combat recording they'd seen earlier. "But their real advantage wasn't technological," Professor Reed said, his voice growing quieter. "It was psychological. Humans had something we'd never encountered, historical trauma. Their planet's long history of warfare had taught them endless ways to fight, survive, and adapt." The hologram changed to show various human battle formations. They used strategies from their ancient naval battles in space. They adapted guerrilla tactics from their forest warfare to asteroid fields. They even modified their old submarine warfare doctrine for gas giant operations. Mark's crystalline form dimmed as Professor Reed continued, "Their most devastating weapon wasn't their technology, it was their creativity. When we jammed their communications, they developed a visual signal system using energy pulses. When we targeted their large ships, they split into smaller units. When we blocked their faster-than-light travel, they weaponized the inhibitor fields themselves." The professor paused, his scales turning a deep blue. "But the true reason for the war ban came from what we found in their archives. Computer, display file HW7. The hologram showed rows of sealed bunkers deep within Earth's crust. Humanity had preparation we never imagined. Underground cities that could house millions. Seed vaults containing their entire biosphere. Plans to convert gas giants into makeshift stars if their sun was destroyed. They weren't just fighting a war, they were ready to outlast one." Jack's fur stood on end as Professor Reed displayed the next image, a massive network of tunnels throughout Earth's moon. They had turned their entire natural satellite into a backup civilization. If Earth was destroyed, humanity would survive and rebuild. No species we'd encountered had ever prepared for war on this scale. The professor's voice grew solemn. The Council didn't ban humans from warfare because they were too dangerous. They did it because humans had proven they could not be defeated, only contained. A species that plans for its own extinction and survival simultaneously is not one you want involved in galactic conflicts. As the lights came back on, Professor Reed looked directly at Tom, Mark, and Jack. Some of you have already begun discovering these truths on your own. Remember, knowledge of human military capability is restricted not to protect us from them, but to protect the galaxy from what might happen if other species begin adopting their methods. After the lecture, as students filed out, Professor Reed called out, "Mr. Tom, a moment please." Tom approached the podium, his friends waiting nervously by the door. "Professor Green told me about your research interests," Reed said quietly. "There's an advanced seminar starting next month. Very exclusive. Very classified." He handed Tom a small data chip. "If you and your friends are interested, this will give you access. Just remember, once you learn the full truth about human warfare, you can never unlearn it." As they left the underground lecture hall, the three friends realized they were now part of something much bigger than a simple thesis project. They were uncovering the truth about why humanity's brief entry into galactic warfare had forever changed how the galaxy thought about conflict, and why some truths were better left buried in classified archives. A week after the secret lecture, Tom, Mark, and Jack sat in Professor Reed's private research chamber. Holographic displays surrounded them, showing detailed battle analyses from the human containment war. "What you're about to see," Professor Reed said, his metallic scales reflecting the blue light of the holograms, "is the real reason the Council created the buffer zone around human space." He inserted a heavily encrypted data crystal into the central console. The holograms shifted to show a massive space station, unlike anything the students had seen before. "This was Unity Station, the pride of the Allied species fleet," Reed explained. "It housed our most advanced research facilities and commanded our entire military operation against Earth. In one day, humans destroyed it without firing a single shot." Tom's fins rippled with confusion. "How is that possible?" "The station's defenses were useless," Reed interrupted, "against an enemy willing to think differently." The hologram zoomed in on the station's final moments. "Humans had noticed something about our artificial gravity systems, a flaw in the quantum field. Generators that we'd overlooked for centuries. They didn't try to exploit it with weapons, they used mathematics." The recording showed small human ships appearing around the station at precise coordinates. "They weren't attacking, they were just waiting. They positioned their ships at exact mathematical points around the station," Reed continued. "Each ship generated a tiny gravitational pulse, harmless on its own. But together, they created a resonance pattern that amplified the quantum field distortion in our artificial gravity." The students watched in horror as the massive station began to twist, its structure warping from the inside out. "The station tore itself apart," Reed said quietly. 300,000 of our best military minds and scientists, defeated by a simple physics equation that humans had discovered in their first decade of faster-than-light travel." Mark's crystalline form flickered nervously. "But surely after that, we adapted our technology?" "We tried," Reed admitted. "But that's what made humans so terrifying. They never used the same trick twice. Once we fixed the gravity resonance vulnerability, they moved on to something else. They turned our shield harmonics into weapons, used our own communication arrays to create devastating feedback loops, and even found ways to manipulate our quantum computers using primitive binary code." Jack's ears flattened against his head. "You're saying they beat us by turning our own technology against us?" "Worse," Reed said, switching to another recording. They showed us that our understanding of warfare was fundamentally flawed. We thought war was about superior technology and numbers. Humans showed us it was about adaptation and will. The new hologram displayed Earth's orbital defense network, a cobbled-together collection of satellites, stations, and ships that should have been easy to overcome. "Look closely," Reed instructed. "What do you see?" Tom studied the display, his fins extending in surprise. "Every piece is different. There's no standardization at all." "Exactly," Reed confirmed. "Humans gave their engineers complete freedom to innovate. When we destroyed one defense platform, they didn't replace it, they built something entirely new and different. Our tactical computers couldn't predict what they'd do because even the humans didn't know until they did it." The professor's scales shifted to a deep red. "But here's the truly frightening part, we later discovered that this wasn't even their real defense network. The visible chaos was a disguise. Deep beneath the moon's surface, they had constructed a quantum entanglement facility that could have instantly transmitted Earth's entire population to hidden colonies across the galaxy." The three friends sat in stunned silence as Reed continued, "The humans never told us about this capability. We only discovered it years after the war, buried in encrypted files. They had the power to preserve their entire civilization, yet they chose to stand and fight instead. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to prove a point." Tom's fins trembled. "What point?" Reed's voice was barely a whisper now. "That humanity would not be quietly contained, controlled, or conquered. Every time we thought we had them beaten, they revealed another layer of preparation, another impossible solution, another way to turn defeat into victory. The war ban wasn't a punishment, it was the galaxy's admission that we'd encountered something we couldn't understand or control." The next day, Tom couldn't focus on his regular classes. His mind kept returning to Professor Reed's revelations about human warfare capabilities. During their lunch break, he found Mark and Jack in their usual corner of the dining hall. "I couldn't sleep last night," Tom said, his fins quivering. "Something about the quantum entanglement facility doesn't make sense. Why build it if they never used it?" Mark's crystalline form pulsed thoughtfully. "Maybe it wasn't just about escape. The humans seem to plan for every possibility." "That's what's bothering me," Jack added, his ears twitching. "We should check the old engineering archives. If they built something that big under their moon, there must be power signatures we detected during the war." Hours later, in the deepest level of the Academy's engineering archives, the three friends hunched over ancient sensor logs. The data streams showed power readings from Earth's moon during the final days of the war. There, Tom pointed at a strange pattern. "The energy signature isn't just from a transportation system. It's much bigger." Mark's crystalline structure brightened with sudden understanding. "These readings, they're similar to the patterns from their gravity weapon, but on a massive scale." "Someone's coming," Jack whispered, his sensitive ears picking up footsteps. But instead of a security guard, Professor Reed emerged from the shadows, his scales glowing faintly in the dim light. "I wondered how long it would take you to find this," the professor said, approaching their terminal. "You're right, the facility wasn't just for evacuation. It was humanity's ultimate deterrent." Reed inserted his own data crystal, and new information filled their screen. The quantum entanglement network could have saved their population, yes. But it could also have done something far more dramatic. The display showed a complex web of energy patterns spreading out from Earth's moon, connecting to various points across the galaxy. "They found a way to quantum entangle entire stellar regions," Reed explained, his voice heavy. "If pushed too far, they could have triggered a cascade of spatial distortions that would have torn apart the fabric of spacetime itself. Not just in their solar system, everywhere within 1,000 light-years." Tom's fins went completely flat against his body. "They would have destroyed themselves too." "That was the point," Reed said. "Humans had a saying from their history, mutually assured destruction. They believed that the best way to prevent total war was to make it so costly that no one would dare start it. Jack's fur stood on end. But that's insane. No species would risk galactic destruction just to avoid defeat. No other species, Reed corrected. But humans? They had done exactly this before, on their own planet, with weapons they called nuclear deterrents. They survived centuries of pointing planet-killing weapons at themselves. When they reached the stars, they simply scaled up the concept. Mark's crystalline form had dimmed to its darkest state. Did the Council know about this when they imposed the war ban? They discovered it during the peace negotiations, Reed confirmed. A human diplomat leaked just enough information to make the Council understand what they were dealing with. The ban wasn't about containing humanity, it was about preventing anyone from giving them a reason to use their deterrent. Tom suddenly remembered something from their first day in the archives. The Admiral's log mentioned scorched earth protocols. This is what he meant, isn't it? Reed nodded. Humanity's message was clear: they would accept peace, they would accept trade, they would accept cultural exchange. But they would not accept subjugation. Ever. The choice they offered the galaxy was simple: leave them alone, or risk everything. But why show us all this? Jack asked. Why reveal such dangerous knowledge to students? Reed's scales shifted to a deep blue. Because the war ban won't last forever. Sooner or later, some species will decide to test humanity's resolve. When that happens, the galaxy will need people who understand what we're really dealing with. The professor looked each student in the eye. Humans aren't just dangerous because of their weapons or tactics. They're dangerous because they've turned their greatest weakness, their fear of extinction, into their greatest strength. They've made survival itself into a weapon that no enemy can overcome. 1 month after their discoveries in the engineering archives, Tom, Mark, and Jack stood before the Academy's thesis review board. Their research project, carefully edited to exclude classified information, had earned them the highest honors. But that wasn't what occupied their thoughts as they left the presentation hall. Did you hear about the Nexus Rebellion? Tom asked quietly as they walked through the Academy's crystal gardens. His fins moved slowly, showing his concern. 3 systems are threatening to break away from the Council's authority. Mark's crystalline form pulsed with worried light. They're on the edge of human space, aren't they? Less than 10 light-years from the buffer zone, Jack confirmed, his ears alert for eavesdroppers. The Council's trying to keep it quiet, but they found Professor Reed waiting for them at their usual study spot, his scales a deep shade of purple. Congratulations on your thesis, he said, but his tone was grave. I assume you've heard the news? Tom nodded. Professor, if the rebellion spreads, and the fighting reaches the buffer zone, then we'll see if humanity remembers its old ways, Reed finished. He activated a small holographic projector, showing the latest news from the rebellion zones. Already, some council members are suggesting we ask for human assistance. They think limited human involvement might end the conflict quickly. That would mean lifting the war ban, Mark said, his crystalline structure flickering anxiously. Partially, yes. Reed's scales shifted to a darker shade. But those council members don't understand what they're really suggesting. Humans don't do limited involvement in conflicts. They only know total commitment. Jack's fur bristled. But surely after all this time, they've changed? It's been generations since the containment war. Reed brought up another hologram, a recent scan of Earth's solar system. Look at their defense network now. It's even more extensive than during the war. They've spent decades preparing, just in case. The hologram showed massive orbital platforms, fleets of ships in constant patrol patterns, and evidence of even more extensive lunar facilities. But something was different about them. The designs, Tom noticed, his fins extending in surprise. They're not chaotic anymore. Everything looks organized. Efficient. Exactly, Reed said. They've refined their methods, standardized their innovations. Humanity hasn't forgotten how to fight, they've been perfecting it. In peace, they found the time to make their desperate improvisations into solid military doctrine. Mark's crystalline form brightened with sudden understanding. That's why you wanted us to learn all this. Not just to understand the past, but to help prevent future mistakes, Reed confirmed. The galaxy needs people who understand that lifting the war ban, even partially, even temporarily, would be like opening a door that we might not be able to close again. Because humans still have their quantum deterrent? Jack asked. Because humans still have something far more dangerous, Reed corrected. They have patience. They've spent generations watching the galaxy, learning our weaknesses, improving their techniques. If we invite them back into warfare, we won't be facing the desperate survivors we fought before. We'll be facing an entire civilization that has had time to perfect the art of impossible victories. The professor stood, his scales returning to their normal color. Your generation may have to make difficult decisions about humanity's role in galactic affairs. When that time comes, remember what you've learned. Humans aren't banned from warfare because they're too violent or too primitive. They're banned because they showed us that our entire understanding of conflict was incomplete. Tom looked out at the setting sun of Centauri Prime. They showed us that true strength isn't about superior technology or numbers. It's about determination, Mark added, his crystalline form glowing steadily. And innovation, Jack continued, his ears forward with confidence. No, Reed said softly. They showed us something far more fundamental. They showed us that a species' greatest moment isn't in victory. He paused, looking at each of his students, but in having the wisdom to make victory unnecessary. Humans didn't just survive their war with the galaxy. They achieved something far more impressive, they made themselves too important to destroy. As the four of them stood watching the sunset, they understood that they were guardians of a vital truth. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the ability to win wars, but the ability to make others question whether victory is worth the cost.